There is a common phrase out there that goes, screw the Pooch. Well, BYU got screwed on a Pooch punt against Kansas and drops to 9-1. So could we say the Cougars got screwed by the Pooch? We're talking about it on POSTCAST.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. This is a special edition postcast as BYU drops to 9-1 on the season by virtue of a 17-13 loss to the Kansas Jayhawks. And let's just off the bat, really tough loss to stomach for BYU. The Cougars, in many respects, did the things, especially defensively, that you would have expected them to do to win this football game. You limited Kansas, a team that scored 45 points a week ago, to 17 points. You held them below 250 total yards, 242 in fact. You held them to 73 rushing yards. Their vaunted rushing attack averaged 2.2 yards per carry. A lot of the metrics for BYU in this game, both even offensively and particularly defensively, indicate that this was a game that BYU should have won, according to metrics. Well, metrics don't win football games. Football players and plays do, and BYU came up short in one particular area, scoring. They mustered just 13 points, 354 yards, 192 yards passing, 162 yards rushing, averaging 4.8 yards per carry. But once again, unable to get it in the end zone when it mattered most. This is a tough loss to stomach for BYU. And yes, there are going to be a handful of plays that we're going to diagnose here as to why BYU lost this game. You look at the metrics once again, I look at this, and a lot of the numbers as compared to Kansas in this matchup were winning numbers for BYU. But I'm fond of saying this on this podcast. Those of you who are everydayers know I like to say this. What ultimately matters in the game of football and in sports in general is the final score. That's where we break it all down. If your team has more points than the other team, you're happy. If your team has less, you're unhappy. And trust me, we got a lot of unhappy Cougar fans because BYU is now fallen from the ranks of the unbeatens and is likely to drop pretty far in the polls as well. Objectively, this is a tough loss to stomach. Kansas 3-6 coming into this game, BYU 9-0. But there was some concern that BYU was faltering a bit in the last few games, particularly last week against Utah, and it caught up with them in this game. Another podcast out there that I am a big fan of, it's called The Solid Verbal, and Dan and Ty, who host that program, for years have used the term LRO. What it stands for, luck runs out. BYU has been the fortunate team on a number of bounces this season to get to that 9-0 record they took into this game. In this game, the bounces went against them, and none bigger, obviously, than the Pooch punt, the quick kick from Jalen Daniels on that fourth down that goes off the helmet and back of Evan Johnson. I don't necessarily know that he necessarily realized what happened in that moment. Then Jacob Robinson tries to come up and pounce on that football, and dove and kind of slipped, it felt like, a little early and just punched the ball forward rather than falling on it, and Kansas falls on it like the 3-yard line. One play later, you have Devin Neal punch it in from whatever it was, 3 or 4 yards out, and it's a 17-13 ball game, and that's how it ended up in this one. There's a lot of plays missed in this game. Early on, Jake Retzlaff had a deep ball to Darius Lassiter, who had at least one, maybe two steps on his defensive back. Jake Retzlaff essentially fired a missile when he needed just to kind of loft it up there and let Darius Lassiter run under it. That's a play that you have to have in the early going of this game, looking back on it, that would have really opened things up. BYU gets a touchdown there. Suddenly it's a 7-7 ball game after Kansas got a touchdown on their opening drive, and you're feeling a lot better about BYU going to toe-to-toe with the Kansas Jayhawks. Then at the end of the half, Kansas gets into scoring territory, makes it 10-10. You have a chance with 1:46 to go to not rush, but to get down the field and get points. Well, what does BYU do? They motor right down the field. They had, I think, 48, maybe 50, was it 48 or 58 seconds? I got that 8 in my head, but I'm not sure if it's a 48 or 58 second mark when it all went down. But then Jake throws what might be the most pathetic, and I'm dead serious, pathetic fade route I have ever seen. He threw it right to Mello Dotson, the cornerback covering Mata'ava Ta'ase on that play. Fade routes on the goal line, I know they're in vogue. I know there's something that college coaches just salivate over, like, all right, we're going to get this. And yes, BYU has been the beneficiary of those fade routes. Look back at that SMU game and the incredible fade route on that 2-point conversion that Keanu Hill brought in. Well, the last two BYU has tried have objectively been awful, and those come against Utah and in this game against Kansas. One was on a 2-point conversion last week against the Utes. This one likely could have and should have been a touchdown for BYU, but instead they come up empty and go to half tied 10-10. That missed opportunity, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown, looms extremely large in the final margin of this game. Then in the third quarter, once again, that Pooch punt, that quick kick from Jalen Daniels. Kalani Sitake said it himself after the game. BYU did not have that scouted, and I can't absolve them of not being ready for it, but at the same time, when you haven't seen teams do this, and by the way, very few college teams do that quick kick with their quarterback. It's not a very common thing at this level of football. It does not absolve BYU in any way. I'm just saying it's abnormal. But by the way, credit to Lance Leipold and his staff for going deep into their playbook and saying, hey, let's try a quick kick on this. And yes, absolutely incredible that ball, where it landed, going off the helmet of Evan Johnson, Jacob Robinson unable to pounce on it. Kansas cashes in a touchdown one play later. It's a tough break for BYU. But all is not lost. That's I should say that right now as well. All is not lost for the BYU football program. Yes, they're 9-1. Yes, the perfect start to the season is over. Yes, the college football playoff committee is probably going to take umbrage with BYU losing to a 3-6 Kansas team. They're probably going to drop in the national polls in those college football playoff rankings. But everything, and I mean everything BYU is chasing this season is still in front of them. One loss is not going to break this team. 2 losses, that might do it. And that obviously comes into effect now when BYU gets ready for Arizona State this coming week. But everything BYU hopes to accomplish this season, a Big 12 title game appearance, a Big 12 title game championship, to have that trophy down there in Arlington, a chance to play in the college football playoff, all of that is still within reach for BYU, and more importantly, it's all in BYU's hands. I say it a lot on this podcast as well. I love the phrase from late Oakland Raiders / now Las Vegas Raiders owner Al Davis. He said, just win, baby, just win. So long as BYU gets back off the mat and wins next week against Arizona State, everything they hope to accomplish is still there for them, and all they got to do is win. That's much easier said than done. I freely acknowledge that fact. But the nice part is BYU has it all within their grasp still, despite this loss. Now, what are some of the other things that I took away from this game that may be kind of lost in the overall analysis of this? Well, good thing you asked. We'll get to that momentarily with some additional thoughts on players I thought either stood out or needed to be a little bit better in their performance. We'll also talk a little bit about the play calling as well, because that seems to be a tough thing for a lot of Cougar fans to stomach in this one. And we'll get to that next right here on this postcast edition of Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys to have some fun this NFL season, and more importantly, you can get started with an incredible offer. $150 in bonus bets if you're simply put $5 bet. Your first $5 bet hits. It's as simple as that. The best part about FanDuel is they got a super easy to use app. You can go on their website when you're in the middle of a game thinking, hey, maybe I want to take advantage of this line over here, or you think something might happen on an over-under. You want to take advantage of it today by doing it with our friends at FanDuel, as they are America's #1 sports book, and that app, once again, makes it super simple and easy to use. You can see live play-by-play stats and everything where you're placing those same bets. You're never out of date and missing something critical when you're casting your bet with our friends over at FanDuel. And once again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. It's as simple as that. So get started today by going to FanDuel.com to get started. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. It's all courtesy of your friends over at FanDuel. And of course, they are a proud sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. All right, BYU, tough loss, zero doubt about that. But there seems to be a lot of angst being cast at Aaron Roderick. And I understand it. The play calling in this game left something to be desired. The officiating in this game left something to be desired. There were some, I would say, blatant holds by Kansas in particular that went uncalled. I would also say that the performance of Jake Retzloff, not up to snuff of what you needed from a star quarterback like himself. And the bigger point to be made here is there is blame to be shared all across the board. I appreciate what Kalani Sitake said to Greg Wrubell and Hans Olsen. I just finished my post-game responsibilities with the KSL Sports Zone. I got in my car, and Kalani was talking with them, and he was talking about the fact that we made poor decisions with the ball. I think it was the direct quote he had, and that's absolutely true. And he said, I'm not trying to put it on the quarterback. I'm not putting on the play calling. I'm putting it across the board. Poor decisions were made with the ball. And I can't disagree with what Kalani, his assessment there, because I think it sums it up well for BYU. There were poor assessments and poor judgments in this game. Yes, I know that Cougar fans are going to be upset that Jake Retzloff threw short of the sticks on that fourth down. We needed to get to 4th and 11 to keep the game alive and have a chance to score to potentially win that game. How about you don't have a false start the play before that? And I can tell you, Connor Pay, who snapped the ball late on that, he is going to be beating himself up from here until you know when. And it's an indefinite when, to be clear about that. Nobody's harder on themselves than these players and coaches. They are, and this is going to come off as me trying to be an apologist for the players and coaches. It's not that. I just know how these guys operate. These are consummate competitors. Any of you who have played at a sport at a high level know what it's like to play, put your best on the field, and when you don't put your best on the field, it makes you up, and it eats you up is what I'm trying to say. It absolutely just it bugs you. I know that BYU's coaches and players are upset about this. One thing I also think got overlooked in all of this is how much that Utah game took out of BYU. I don't think it's a coincidence that Utah and BYU lost this week after that absolute dogfight of a game a week ago. Many of you know, some of you may not, because I still get a bunch of you getting grumpy that I don't wear my BYU gear enough on this podcast. To be very clear, this is not my main job. Most of you know that I work a day job for the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's a sports radio station. We cover the Utes, we cover the Cougars, we cover the Jazz, we cover the Utah Hockey Club. We cover all the sports out there. Well, for years, when Utah was in the Pac-12, we talked often, we heard it from people up at Utah, that the game after the BYU game, whenever it came, whether it was early in the season, late in the season, if it was not the final game of the season, they called it the hangover effect the following week, because so much energy, and I'm talking, it's emotional, it's physical, it's almost spiritual in a way, just the energy that is expended on that rivalry game saps the teams in it. And in particular, when it came to Utah and they're having to jump back into Pac-12 play for a lot of those years, they felt like there was a hangover effect that really affected them. And the record after the BYU game for Utah during the Pac-12 run, not stellar. I think we're seeing a similar effect here. And I know it's only a 1-game sample size, but I don't think it's a coincidence that both Utah and BYU lost the week after that rivalry game. It's a reason why I'm an advocate for that game to move to the final weekend of the year, because once again, so much energy gets expended in that game that I think it sapped both of these teams, and they needed some extra time to potentially get back and be at full capacity against, in Utah's case, Colorado, and in this case, BYU against Kansas. Is that me being an apologist? You can be the judge of that yourself, but I really do think that that is an overlooked thing in this game for BYU. I know the players and coaches aren't going to accept that. They obviously are going to try and say, hey, we got to be better about this. And they should be better, because there was poor execution. There were poor play calls. There was poorly timed penalties. That false start, critical moment. You can't have that. You're 4th and 6, and then you back yourself up 5 more yards. The percentage of getting a 4th and 6 conversion is already low enough. Don't compound it by going to 4th and 11. So once again, I think the excuses, the blame, I think it's shared across the board. That goes on Kalani Sitake for part of it. That goes on part of it for Aaron Roderick. Part of it goes on Jake Retzloff. Part of it goes on the O-line. I think everybody shares in the blame. I will also say this. The offense was the weak point in this game. BYU's defense came to ball out time and time again after that opening series against Kansas. That defense did its job. Think about it. They gave up an 84-yard touchdown drive to open the game, and then after that, they allowed 242 minus 84 yards, whatever that yardage equals out to. That's all BYU gave up. It's 160, even less than that, like 100 and whatever. You get what I'm talking about. It's an incredible performance for BYU defensively. The defense should hold their heads high. The offense, yeah, that's going to be some tough scenes when it comes to the film review come Monday morning when they sit down with the coaches and look at things. They missed multiple opportunities. We're talking multiple trips to the red zone. I think I saw from Darnell Dixon the past 22 possessions for BYU offensively, 3 touchdowns, and that stretches back to, I think, halftime against UCF. Brutal numbers, and they got to get back on the saddle. And I don't have a ready-made answer for it. So if you're saying, well, it's fire Aaron Roderick, I don't think that's the right answer right now. I think there needs to be an introspection and a look at what exactly is BYU, the numbers, what do they bear out? Because a lot of times you can look at numbers, you can find answers there. At the same time, you also have to have the players execute as well. That 4th down play, that 4th and 11, a lot of fans, and trust me, my social media feed lit up like a Christmas tree after that play. How in the world did I throw to the sticks there? They got pressure on Jake Retzlaff, and I think he had to get rid of that football because you got to give your guys a chance to make a play, and that probably in his field of vision was the best option available to him at the time. I'm sure that I'm going to rewatch that on film because I have not had a chance to rewatch it. Many of you know that I will do that coming up. In this case, it's early Sunday morning, so later on this afternoon, I'll have a full recap for you guys on tomorrow's podcast. But I'm going to look at that and see if there were other options for Jake, and there always seem to be those options out there. If you look at the film, you have to understand when you have pressure in your face, you just got to unload the ball. And Jake did the best I think he could in that circumstance. I don't know what is causing BYU's inability to score points and in particular touchdowns of late, but they got to get it fixed. Arizona State's chomping at the bit. They know, similar to BYU, that their fate is fully in their hands. They could find themselves in the Big 12 title game, and a big step towards doing that, oh yeah, knocking off BYU next week in Tempe. Stuart Mandel said it best, I think, that we have a college football playoff eliminator game next week in Tempe, Arizona, between Arizona State and BYU. He said that's a sentence that's never been written before, and he's dead right. We have not had that sentence written before, but it's an actual reality. 2 of the teams projected to be the bottom dwellers, in particular, the actual bottom dweller in Arizona State, both of them now battling for a chance to go to the Big 12 title game. It's all there for BYU, and the nice part is, if you win, you're essentially in. That's all the mentality's got to be for BYU. Find a way to score touchdowns. Find a way to get the offense going again. Have the defense keep doing what it's doing. And, oh, by the way, let's get the special teams doing its part still as well. I like where BYU is at, and I know that sounds weird to say after a loss, but everything is still there for the Cougars to play for, and I've got faith that they understand it, and they're going to be chomping at the bit, similar to Arizona State, to go out there and prove all the naysayers wrong once again. They're going to beat themselves up over this game. It was a missed opportunity, multiple trips into the red zone, and to come up empty in multiple of those trips, it's not going to sit well with anybody, fans, players, coaches, administrators, anybody involved. That's not good enough. And BYU knows it, and I'm sure they'll be working hard at practice this week to rectify it. But the hope is that the luck runs out, the big, bad target on their back, maybe something that's lifted off of them after this loss in the same way, and they can play maybe a little more free and easy versus having to be like, ooh, we got to live up. Play your game. As simple as that. Play your game, win the game, and punch your ticket to Arlington. It's all right there for BYU. All right, your guys' time to shine. And trust me, the comments on this, pretty interesting. And we're going to delve into those momentarily because y'all had a lot of thoughts on this one. And let's just put it this way. There's 2 or 3 key themes. I think most of you can guess exactly what they are, but we'll get to those next as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at GameTime. Now, if you want to get out to events, whether it's a BYU football game, BYU basketball game, or anything else besides sports even, if you want to go to a concert, theater event, you want to go see your favorite comedian, GameTime Picks is here for you guys. And the best part of GameTime Picks is on the GameTime app. They filter through thousands of other tickets to filter out all the fluff and find the right options for you guys with the best deal for the tickets for the events you're looking to go to. I love the fact you can toggle what they call in their all-in pricing feature inside the GameTime app as well. All you got to do is toggle that. You'll know exactly what you're paying total right up front. No extra fees tacked on at the end of your checkout screen, like all these other ticket resellers out there. That's also best part about GameTime is they have their GameTime guarantee. If you find better prices on seats in the same section, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's as simple as that, my friends. So take advantage of the opportunity today. You might download the GameTime app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege and get $20 off your first purchase. That's promo code LOCKEDONCollege on the GameTime app today and save that $20. The best part is you can also take advantage of all the different deals with that GameTime Picks feature. So it's all available to you now with our friends over at GameTime. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars in this postcast your first listen and or view of the day. If you have not done so already, sign up for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Would love for you guys to be a part of this. All right, let's see here. Questions and thoughts from you guys out there in Cougar Nation. First thing from Dirk Palmer. Need to get LJ Martin 20 carries per game. I think BYU is an incredible record when he does at least 20 touches, in my honest opinion. It's a great point, Dirk, and it's something that I'm wondering myself. Why is a guy like LJ Martin, who appears to be a thoroughbred running back, not getting as many touches as I think many of us feel he should be getting? Wish I had a good answer for you on that. But the bigger point I think needs to be made here is that I think BYU understands what the limitations of LJ's physical status is right now, like just his health. Because remember, this is a kid who's dealt with numerous injuries this season. There was a high ankle sprain, if I recall correctly, against SMU that knocked him out for a number of games. He had an upper body injury he's still been nursing all season long. Could those things be hampering him, and they're only allowed to get him 15 carries? That's what he had in this game. He had 15 carries, 76 yards. I would love to say that if you have 30 carries there, he doubles those numbers. 15, double that to 30, 76 yards turns into 132 yards, and in theory, maybe a touchdown tossed in there. I would like to see more of LJ Martin. I think he is far and away BYU's best and most effective running back. That does not take away from Hinckley Rapati. He had 8 carries for 35 yards in his own right, averaging 4.4 yards per carry. Those are good numbers. I want to see more of it. And I think the simple fact of the matter is BYU found themselves in a situation where they had to throw the ball a little bit more towards the end of this game because of the limited amount of possessions and obviously the time remaining. Just the circumstances dictated that. But yes, I do want to see more from LJ Martin. I'm with you on that. It's absolutely true. Hunter, run the dang ball with LJ. I agree with you on that. Maybe you had BYU run the ball in that fade situation at the end of the half. LJ punches it and you have the touchdown. It's all retrospect on this. Tyson, scoring 13 points will get you a loss 99% of the time. Too many empty trips to the red zone. Defense is predictably bad on third down still. And BYU burned their mulligan tonight. We burned the Big 12's chance to have 2 teams in the playoff. Trip to Tempe is looking scary right about now. Can't disagree with you on anything of that. But BYU still has the opportunity to go out there and bounce back. And if they beat ASU, it's all there for us. And yes, there's going to be some of those out there in the Big 12. Our friend Drake Toll probably will talk about it. The BYU may have screwed their chances of getting a second at-large team into the college football playoff. So be it. This league, it's topsy-turvy. It has cannibalized itself, and BYU finally fell victim to it. And it sucks. It does suck that BYU lost this game. But once again, the positive side of it is BYU didn't lose anything in terms of losing control of their future. That's the nice part about this. Let's see. Mark Sanders, I can't imagine that Ryder Lyons and his teammates were very impressed with that pathetic performance. Okay? Maybe not. But at the same time, you could flip that on its head. Speaking of BYU's coaches, hey, you see that quarterback play out there? Why don't you come here and be the quarterback that gets this really untracked for us? That could be the message to a guy like Ryder Lyons. You can look at it from the positive side of things too. Dennis, I would rather lose to Kansas than lose to Utah. Dennis, I think, nailed it. I'm going to probably pull a poll question up. How many of you are more accepting of a loss to Kansas than you are to Utah? Both of them, mind you, have the same record right now. Utah dropped to 4-6 with their blowout loss to Colorado today. I guess speaking of yesterday, technically, by the time I recorded this. But would you rather lose to Kansas or would you rather lose to Utah? I think 98.7% of you would take Kansas over Utah every single time. Tough game from Chad here, and a tough loss, but the team needs to not get down about it. Just get ready for next week because it's a train yard. Well, yeah, hold on. It's a train yard you're going into there at Arizona State. I've never heard that term before. A train yard. I know that you're going into, locomotive. Okay, steamrolled. Okay, I'm getting with the what you're saying here, Chad. But yeah, you can't feel sorry for yourself. BYU cannot afford to have the hangover from Utah turn into a letdown from Kansas that cost them a major opportunity at Arizona State. You follow me there? Hangover from Utah affected BYU in this loss against Kansas. You cannot afford to have a letdown now when you go up against Arizona State next Saturday and have this season that was looking so promising suddenly tailspin from you being at 9-0 to 9-2. You cannot afford to do that right now. Other thoughts here. Austin, am I heartbroken? Of course, but I'm not ready to give up on this team after this. We still control our destiny. And now, these keep screwing up. And now we've got the wake-up call so we can get back to our game right for when it's most important. That's a good point there. BYU did get a wake-up call in this game. Maybe they're not as good as everybody was saying they are, and some of the naysayers out there saying they weren't as good as the metrics showed. Maybe take some of the pressure off this team. I think there was pressure building around this team, and they kept saying, hey, we're not letting it get to us. We're not letting it get to us. I think it got to them, and I think that they choked in the moment, but I think it's a very good point here from Austin. Am I heartbroken right now in this moment? Absolutely, because I'm not ready to give up on this team after just this. We, speaking of BYU, still control our destiny. We've gotten the wake-up call, so we, speaking of BYU, can get back to our game for right when it's most important. Hopefully it serves as that wake-up call. I agree with you on that. That's a great point there. Other thoughts here. I'm just kind of, like I said, I've got, between Twitter and our Locked On Cougars Insider group, I think Twitter, I saw, last I checked before I started recording, 139 responses. And then on our Locked On Cougars Insider group, probably close to that as well. Bryce, got to execute in the red zone. They should have won this game running away, but they dropped the ball literally in some cases. Oh, well, the beauty of being in a conference is there's still everything to play for. It's a good point. Remember, in independence, one loss was a death knell for BYU. Didn't matter if you have 1 or 6 losses. You're essentially going to the same bowl game for BYU and independence. The nice part is, as Bryce points out, BYU is in a conference, and there's still a conference race being run, and you're right in the thick of it, even though if you may have lost a little bit off the pace there that you were setting earlier on in this season. Jordan, I know speaking of Kansas, were a good 3-win team, but if the offense played even 10% better, BYU wins that game by 10+ points. There's an argument to be made there. Have BYU been able to cash in, especially when you got in the red zone, and it came up short time and time again. Punch those in for some touchdowns. BYU's got 35 points, I think, based on the red zone possessions in that one, and that would have run away with that victory. Chris, season isn't over yet. Let's see. Other thoughts here. Every ball bounced their way tonight, and our coaches screwed us with their time management, which was pathetic. That comes from Dave. There's a thought there on the time management, because I do think BYU at times gets in their own way with regards to getting personnel on the field, getting play calls in a timely fashion, and it does affect the play. The one other thought that brings up in my mind is something I probably should have brought up earlier. BYU played at a pretty slow pace in this game, and Kansas did the exact same thing. There were limited possessions in this game. BYU still snapped the ball 63 times. I got some thought in my head, though. Remember, Jake Retzloff seems to thrive in that 2-minute up-tempo offense. Does BYU decide to maybe throw the game plan they have where they want to kind of control the tempo of the game and not put their defense in a bad position? That's kind of the whole, I think, thought process with the pace that BYU plays at. But I've got some thought in my head with the way the 2-minute offense, and I know you can't defend the fade throw that Jake Retzloff had that cost them on that possession. But remember, they motored right down the field in like 3 or 4 plays and got themselves in scoring territory just like that. Maybe, just maybe, Aaron Roderick looking for a spark for this offense. Maybe they shift to more of an up-tempo system where you go no huddle and you get out there, you're ready to be able to call down to Jake. He's calling it out on the field, and you go out there and play the game. The other thing about it is that 3rd and 6 play that he ran the option on, he apparently audibled to that. What did he see on that circumstance? What was the play call that he felt like he needed audible out of? Maybe he should have trusted that play call. There's so many things to examine here, but I'd like to see some tempo from BYU. Run that 2-minute, get into some more high tempo situations and see if it yields better results for BYU. I'm not saying you have to play it every single series of a game, but some of those series go out there and say, okay, guys, we're going, I'd call it, I guess, like turbo. You don't want to call it a 2-minute offense because it's not 2 minutes, but call it your turbo offense and go out there and essentially run a 2-minute drill, but maybe still have like 10 minutes to go in a quarter and see what it yields. And if it works, keep doing it. But at the same time, you can throw teams off. You go quick on one series and you come out and go back to your regular pace. I know that might affect BYU as well, but the tempo, I think, is something that BYU may want to examine in the aftermath of this loss. So Overall, yeah, tough loss for BYU, zero doubt about it. But once again, let's reiterate the point. Everything BYU is playing for and hoping for right now, still within their grasp and still within their control. And that is the positive, I think, to take away from this one as BYU drops to 9-1 and 6-1 in conference. All right, we'll have more on this for you guys coming up tomorrow on the podcast. I'll have rewatched the game, get some extra thoughts for you. Maybe I saw something with regards to the offense I felt like was a miss. We'll dig into that and we'll share it with you guys once we reconvene on our regular Monday edition of the show. But as always, thank you to all of you for your thoughts, your comments, your interaction with the show. Without you guys, this isn't a thing. So thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And as always, thank you for being everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.